Okay, I know I promised an analysis of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. That is taking longer than I expected. And I'm trying to really get into kind of the fandom and try to make a case for what it is and why it is. Um, and all that. So that's taking longer than expected. And for this week, I just wanted to do another viewer mail, and people have been sending in some great questions. Right quick, one thing a lot of people were asking about what I thought of George R. R. Martin and Game of Thrones, the TV series and the books. Honestly, I haven't seen or read any of it, and I mean, it's not because I don't think I would enjoy it. I probably would enjoy it. A lot of people have been saying I would. So I probably would enjoy it, but ultimately I have such a tall stack of movies to watch and books to read that I may get to it at some point. It's like right now I am reading Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood, and I am reading Perturabo, the biography of Aleister Crowley by Richard Kaczynski. And so those are taking up, most of my time, and it's just after immediately after that, I'm going to on October 2nd, I'm going to get Sun by Lois Lowry and read that, and it's just going to keep going. So it's hard to get the time to bring in stuff. I have my reading list is literally backlogged by years at this point. So anyway, getting into the questions. Let's see. Colonel Panda Bear asks, Obama or Romney? No third-party cop-outs. Well, that's an easy question to answer. Barack Obama. I will be voting for Barack Obama in November. And before all of my libertarian friends gasp and ask me how I could vote for such a complete socialist, well, first of all, he's not. And second of all, I really, there would have to be a profound change of direction and change of the guard in the Republican Party before I would even consider voting for a Republican. For me, the debate, in my personal debate, was not between Obama and Romney, it was between Obama and Gary Johnson. And I would have liked to have seen Gary Johnson have a better showing, but obviously he's not going to be on stage at the debates. He's not going to. I don't even know if he's going to be on all the ballots or on the ballots in every state. So as much as impressed as I am with his platform, I don't think that he has a chance. So it will be Barack Obama for me. And the reasons are, first of all, there are some social reforms that I want to see passed. I want to see gay marriage legalized. I want to see pot be decriminalized, and I want to see women's rights, women's health care, especially, be more solidified. I suppose would be the right word. And then also, I don't want any of the antis to gain any ground with their censorship witch hunts that they get onto. And under Obama, I know Obama's been raiding medical marijuana facilities. I'm aware of that. But under Obama, those things have a chance of happening. All of those social reforms have a chance of happening. And I don't, on the drugs issue, I don't do any drugs myself, but I want to see all drugs be decriminalized, and I want to see an end to the war on drugs. It's a complete and utter waste of taxpayer time and our taxpayer money and law enforcement's time and all of that. So none of those, none of those things, there's no chance in hell any of those things are going to happen under Mitt Romney. Then the next thing is that Mitt Romney is not, he is, don't get me wrong, he is a successful, he's a successful financier, and he's a successful investor. but he is not a good advocate of capitalism as I see Ayn Rand advocating it. And the thing is, it's kind of Mitt Romney. The thing about it, if you read Atlas Shrugged, there is no political solution offered whatsoever. The idea is not that politicians will make life better for capitalists. The idea is that politicians stay away from capitalists. They stay away from the economy. They stay away from all of that. And they stay away from money and business and commerce. And so, these Republican dipshits that are saying we're going to be pro-market and pro-capitalist by getting this politician or that politician in there. No, you don't. Politicians have no business running on the economy, and that's kind of the thing. Is the guy, I can't think of his name right now, but episode before last on Bill Maher, the guy from The Economist, I can't think of his name, but he was there, and he pointed out how really the Republicans, the Tea Party, and that sort of thing are becoming the new welfare, or not welfare, but the new entitlement, the new begging off the government to eat and that sort of thing, begging the government to, or expecting the government to fix the economy. And that's the problem is, the economy, really the government doesn't need to have its hands in the economy at all. So between the two, both Obama and Romney are going to put their hands in the economy. I would much rather that be Barack Obama than Mitt Romney. I know what I know what 8 years under George W. Bush was like, and I was in college for 4 years in Boston while Mitt Romney was governor. And quite frankly, the only thing scarier than a stupid George W. Bush is a smart George W. Bush. So I don't want I don't want anything to do with Mitt Romney's economic policies, and obviously his social policy is complete bullshit. And he's just going to be, I think, yet another uber religious Republican GOP politician asshole. And the simple fact that his variant of Christianity is sort of a hybrid of Scientology and Little House on the Prairie doesn't change the fact that he is far too religiously motivated to be inside my comfort zone at all. I mean, obviously Barack Obama professes to be a Christian, but that his faith is just so not a part, it would seem, not a part of his governing policy now, or his governing practice. Now, I mean, he did extend faith-based initiatives and all of that. He's not. He's certainly not perfect. He certainly needs to. Should have gotten rid of the Patriot Act and all of that. But he's accomplished, I think, a great deal, and he got Bin Laden, and that's, I think that was just this glaring embarrassment from the last presidency, and I'm glad it was corrected by Obama. So that I am pleased with, and I am impressed by. So Barack Obama will be getting my vote, and that's where I stand. Okay, My Kingdom 666 asks, what are some of your favorite techniques and scales to play or listen to on guitar? Well, as far as listening, I don't honestly listen to techniques. I listen to music. And the whole thing about the techniques is that the techniques are there to facilitate playing the music. Now, I love virtuosity. I love shredding. I love I love shredding, I love arpeggios, I love tapping, I love the whole 9 yards of guitar technique. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about creating the music. And I think one of the best examples of that is Joe Satriani. When he plays guitar, if you go listen to Surfing with the Alien or Ice Nine or Satch Boogie and all that, his techniques are employed in such a way that you go from listening to music on the guitar to listening to music. And that's really profound, that it just transports you into this arena of pure sound. And he's able to accomplish that with his techniques. So rather than listening to a series of techniques, you are just listening to beautifully played, technically proficient music. And so that aspect of it, I just prefer. I prefer the people who can synthesize the techniques smoothly and effectively. John Petrucci is another great example. Jason Becker as well. So those guys. Now, moving on to the question of scales and what scales do I like to play on the guitar? Really, the only scales you need are the 7 modal diatonic scales. And, there's harmonic minor and melodic minor in there as well. But the 7 diatonic scales are simply the most critical ones, and everything else proceeds from that. So I'll explain why, but first let's establish the modes, the 7 diatonic modes on guitar. Here they are in the key of G. Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and come back down here for Locrian. Okay, so the question then becomes, how do you take these modes, all of these modes, and put variations on them that will make them sound more exotic over the chords? And the simple thing is to understand that most guitarists do this anyway when they're playing the blues. If you play an A blues, it's an A dominant 7. All right, you take that chord. The notes of that chord are going to be A, E, C sharp, and G, right? So there is only 3 of those notes, the root, the 5th, and the 7th, fit with the blues scale, right? And so the blues scale is a minor scale. Like I said, of all of the characteristic pitches are the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th. The only note that the blues scale has in common with a dominant 7 chord is the 7th degree. Other than that, it is quite completely harmonically wrong with regards to the characteristic pitches. And characteristic pitches determine whether or not the chord is major or minor, while the constant pitches are going to be the root, the 4th, and the 5th, although modally, obviously, those can vary as well. So the point, I bring this up to point out that you are used to playing a very exotic scale against a dominant 7 chord. So on. And the reason your ear is comfortable hearing that minor sound over this dominant 7 chord is because we're simply acquainted with the blues to such a degree that it sounds correct. Those relationships sound correct to us simply because we've been so exposed to it in Western music. Now, you think about certain Asian cultures, like traditional Japanese music is supposed to have 16 notes on each scale, and that that's something that we in the West are very, very unaccustomed to. That microtonal scale kind of approach, and Harry Parch being one of the few people that really deeply embraced microtonality in the West. And so, consequently, what sounds exotic to us sounds, I would think, very passe to certain Eastern audiences and that sort of thing. So, let's take one of the modal scales. Let's say Aeolian in the key of A, right? All right. So Aeolian in the key, Aeolian in the key of A minor. Anyway, so Aeolian minor, there's that scale. Now, what are the variations? Well, the characteristic pitches are going to be C, which is the minor third, F, which is the minor sixth, and then G, which is the minor seventh. All right. So the exotic sound is going to come in when you do variations on that. If I play A minor, it sounds very diatonic over that. Now, G sharp is nowhere to be found in a natural minor scale, but it's extremely exotic and compelling. Try incorporating that and a major third as a passing tone. And you start to hear that kind of Al Di Meola inspired exotic flair coming out. Marty Friedman explained this really well in a column, one of his Guitar World columns that I read, and I really liked this idea. We talked about when you're playing outside the chord like that, what you want to do is not get caught. And basically that means you don't want to sustain too long on a non-diatonic note. You want to use them as passing tones. And so, for example, and he said it's like walking through a rough neighborhood. That when you're walking through a rough neighborhood, what do? You don't draw attention to yourself. You don't stop and look at anybody, and you don't stop moving at all. You keep moving. So that is, and you don't look unsure of yourself. And so, bringing that into guitar playing, if I use a non-chord, non-diatonic note as a passing tone, I can create a very exotic sound while still remaining true to the overall nature of the scale. And that's what you need to start exploring and get comfortable with doing that instead of trying to practice certain scales and certain modes that are going to make you sound exotic automatically. Really, the course that I like to set people on is to start looking at the modes laterally. So if we were to take that A minor shape, that's the first octave of a natural minor scale. So if we take that and take the first two strings and start applying it to each of these two string groupings, these notes repeat over 3 octaves, right? So what you can start doing is soloing laterally, and this is really important because a lot of people, when they start soloing, they start just soloing up and down the boxes, those box scale shapes that I was just showing you. Really, the thing to get a compelling sound is to go laterally. Go horizontally. So that's where you start getting a more a much richer soloing environment when you start thinking across the neck like that. And that's what the modes should ultimately do for you, is get just get you comfortable knowing the neck of the guitar all the way up and down, knowing the entire key. I was earlier playing in the key of G. The modes allow you to know the entire neck of the guitar in the key of G. I switched to just now to F sharp, natural minor. So by doing that, learning all of those modes, the entire neck of the guitar in the key of A major, and so on and so forth. So that's what you need to start doing, is just develop your ear. The exotic scales are going to hold you back in the extreme. So anyway, on to the next question. And incidentally, music is what I do professionally. So if you've enjoyed this free lesson I've just given you, please be sure to pick up a copy of my new band's latest or upcoming recording when it comes out. And I will move on to the last question of the night, and anxiously await some 15-year-old dipshit that thinks he knows everything there is to know about music to just come, critique my playing.
Dear Jordan Owen, who the fuck do you think you are? I just got done listening to the back alley abortion that was your quote-unquote guitar lesson, and all I can say is that I have heard greater insights on music from the centipede-filled anus of a demonically possessed giraffe bestiality enthusiast. How the fuck can you even call yourself a musician? Every pathetic failure of a note that you attempt just makes me want to vomit aardvark turds out my eye sockets. I'll have you know that I am a close personal friend of Oleg Van Schweitzen, guitarist for the epic traditional Trucavelt black and death metal band Zombie Viking Penis, and he told me that until you can play every note of his solo on unanesthetized testicular pulverization, you have no business calling yourself a guitar player.
Okay, Russell asks, I was wondering if you could list what some of your favorite science fiction films are, or films in general. Thanks. Sure, I'll just give you my top 10 favorite films, because they're mostly science fiction anyway. Alright, number 10, Cube. And Cube, and then the sequels, Hypercube and Cube Zero, which is technically a prequel. But Cube is one of my favorite movies for a few reasons. One, it really beautifully demonstrates how you can make an engrossing, compelling, fascinating science fiction thriller out of a very simple design, a very simple setup. This is a movie that looks like it cost about, I don't know, but it probably cost about maybe 20 grand to make or so. I mean, something ridiculously low, but even so, it looks so good. It looks so absorbing. The characters can be a little bit hackneyed at times, but nevertheless, the idea is so compelling, and I love any kind of science fiction that places people, a small group of people, unwillingly into a uncomfortable, bizarre, alien surrounding, and they have to try to work out what's going on without eating each other alive in the process. My favorite short story by Harlan is by Harlan Ellison. It's called "I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream," and it's very much that same idea. In that case, it's 5 people that are trapped in the vast inner workings of a supercomputer. So that right there is just one of my favorite premises, and it's realized beautifully. So Cube, and then of course the sheer inventiveness of the ways that people die in that movie is just awesome. From a gore splatter standpoint, it's just very creative. Number 9 is going to be Kairo, aka Pulse, by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. And I emphasize that this is the Japanese version, not the dumbass Western adaptation that I think it was Wes Craven did. Kairo is one of the most wonderfully haunting movies. It is you don't understand until you really sit and think about it, but it actually is a science fiction film. But it seems like a horror film. That's what you feel. It feels like it's going to be a Japanese horror film, and that's the tone that's set through the whole thing. And Kiyoshi Kurosawa, he's kind of regarded as the other Kurosawa director in Japan, but his work is so stunning that it is horror and horrific cinema done so well that it literally puts tears in my eyes. It is done so beautifully and so smoothly and subtly. And subtlety is the key word with his stuff. His stuff, in the West, I think people are very enamored with the kind of Friday the 13th type horror movies where it's just some, faceless, nameless creature, whatever it is, that's chasing you through the woods, and it doesn't matter who the people are that are being chased through the woods, they're just there to be hacked up into pieces. And it's just this kind of things go bump in the night sort of experience. Kurosawa Kiyoshi Kurosawa does not do that. He does not do that at all. He is far, far more subtle, and the idea in Kairo is that people are just sort of vanishing. They just sort of, it's kind of like you turn you go into another room and come back, and the guy that was in the room is gone now. And the idea is that people are feeling so isolated and so cut off from each other, so lacking in personal connection, that it's as if they don't have anything holding them, binding them to this reality anymore, and they're just disappearing. And so you are taken through a Tokyo that is increasingly empty and increasingly desolate, and you start to feel this just unbelievable sense, haunted sense of aloneness, and you start to get the feeling, a sense of solitude, and you start to get the feeling that that there is a whole philosophical and intellectual component to the pain of human isolation that's never been contemplated before. And his work is utterly remarkable in that regard. It is truly stunning, and all of his movies, Bright Future, Cure, Doppelganger, they're all worth watching. And but that one in particular is one of my favorites. He really, one of the things that's really cool about what he does is that he is so subtle, and there's that word again, but subtle, and so minimalist in the musical soundtracks that he uses. His films will have very, very little music at all. Cure has almost no music whatsoever, but they'll have very, very little music. And instead, what he does is really accentuate ambient noise, the ambient noise of what's going on around you, the surrounding noises, people are tapping on keyboards or car horns, that kind of thing. He accentuates that a lot more, but then he uses a lot more just dead, thick, droning ambient sounds, the kind of thing you'd hear if you listen to someone like Lustmord. And so wonderfully, wonderfully absorbing movie. And it's so fascinating because it's such a calming movie. It's such a relaxing movie. And I've never been horrified in a way that was so utterly uh, soporific, if you will. So just so incredibly calming. And so it's very remarkable, and it's sort of the feeling. The best way to describe the feeling I get from watching it is that it's kind of like if you have a really strong dream and you wake up from it suddenly, and the dream is so profound that the feeling of the dream, the emotions you're experiencing in the dream, and the feeling of being in that bizarre headspace kind of stays with you throughout the entire day. That's what it's like to watch one of his movies. His movies become scary in the afterthought. When you're reflecting on what you've seen and thinking about it, you start to become more and more terrified in retrospect. And that is something that, to me, I think is utterly unique among directors. I've never experienced a director that has quite the touch and the finesse and the skill that he has. Coming in at number 8 is the first 4 Alien movies. And I say the first 4, they, to me, represent kind of one overarching film that really just kind of works as one continuous piece, I think. And there are a lot of amazing things about the series. In the first Alien movie, what I love is that really, if you think about it, it's a very simple premise. I mean, it's a very simple idea. It's a creature that's out to get us. I was talking about that in the last segment, that how horror is kind of done in the West. It's a very simple premise that there's this thing that's out to get us. And really, Ash being an android is really the only major plot twist that happens throughout the whole thing. And so the thing is, though, it's just handled so carefully and so beautifully that you get lost in the sheer artistry of it. And the everything about that movie is just fantastic. It's why I love Ridley Scott. It's and you can't mention that movie without mentioning, of course, H.R. Geiger. And Geiger's art is all the way through the whole thing. Just the influence is so profound, and it just draws you, sucks you into that world. It's like H.P. Lovecraft in outer space. Yeah. So that sheer immersiveness of it makes the first film alone appealing. But I love the way the story evolves through the course of the subsequent films. They're able to advance a rather complex story without ever making the viewer feel like, in my opinion, making the viewer feel like they are bogged down in a lot of detail, or not detail, but a lot of extra plot information. It doesn't feel as heavy as, say, a Star Trek movie. And so that I love. And the second one, I actually met Lance Heinrichsen one time at Dragon Con. He was a cool guy. But the second one is, it ups the ante as far as everything that's going on, but it really handles the suspense well. As I think as Roger Ebert pointed out, that there's so much time where we don't even see the aliens in that one. I mean, there's so much buildup and so much anticipation. The little girl Newt is fantastic. She's just awesome, and she creates so much tension because, if you haven't seen the movies, and there may be some spoilers here if you haven't seen the movies, but she is, there's this eternal question of, is she going to be a ticking time bomb? Is she going to have an alien jump out of her at some point? And so there's that. And then I love the idea of anything that brings human beings face to face with the reality of the insect world on a massive level. The Fog was a movie that was like that. If you saw that recently, but with what's his name, Thomas Jane was the main character, and Dead Can Dance did the soundtrack. Anyway, but I love, the sheer horror of what goes on in the insect world. That's basically, I think, where you get the xenomorphic idea. The sheer horror of what's going on in the insect world is just fascinating when it's blown up on a level that's bigger than we are. Insects we can ignore very easily, but when it's on that level, we can't ignore it anymore, and it's just overpowering the sheer mindless savagery of all of that, of insects that reproduce by planting their eggs inside of another creature, being wound up in a web of some kind and having your insides sucked out. I mean, all of those things become just supremely horrific. And people talk about the savagery of the animal kingdom. Getting down to the insect level is just psychotic. So that's part of what makes the series so appealing. And I really, a lot of people didn't like Alien 3 for some reason. I really liked it for a couple of reasons. One, I love the sheer nihilism of it. I love the idea that after everything they went through in the first film to save Newt, she's dead at the beginning of the second one. And I love that because I love the idea of what is moral when morality has to be an end in itself, when virtue has to be an end in itself. What do you consider to be moral? And so the act of saving Newt, of saving the little girl, is supremely moral, even though she's dead by the beginning. She's dead at the beginning of the second movie. And there is a very haunting sense of kind of dehumanization when they dispose of the body. And when they, I'm blanking on the guy's name who played Kyle Reese in Terminator. They dispose of those bodies and throw them down to be destroyed and everything. There's this wonderful just sense of bleakness that's captured so beautifully. And another thing I like about Alien 3 is that you get to see a certain amount of the evolution of the xenomorph. I love that it impregnates the dog, and so when it comes out, it has dog aspects to it, and that's a really cool thing because until then, really, we've only seen xenomorphs come out of humans, and so they're more humanoid, and that's something to really stop and consider is. Do they take on the DNA of some of the characteristics of their host to kind of better survive in their environment and that sort of thing? So that's really cool. And then there's some great characters in there. The idea of the penal colony, the intergalactic penal colony of people who have chosen to stay there and everything. And that I think is really cool. And then Alien 4, that's kind of almost my favorite of the whole first four films, just because at that point I think they knew that after 3 films, no one was really going to be scared of the aliens anymore. They were going to be more turned on by the weirdness of it, and that's what they played to. They played to the weirdness, the bizarre, the surrealism of the whole thing, and it really works. And that scene where the very, very humanoid alien is talking to Ripley at the end, and the creature in the big flesh room is just it just blows my mind. It's one of the most fascinatingly disgusting scenes in a movie I've ever seen. So that's really cool. And then I say the first 4 movies because, oh my God, Alien versus Predator, both of those movies so fucking stupid. It's just unreal. I mean, it ruins literally everything about the Alien franchise because, first of all, through all 4 of the first movies, the whole point of the thing was we're going to We have to stop the aliens from getting to Earth. Anywhere, any planet that the aliens infest, they take it over instantly and just eat the native species alive. So if they get loose on Earth, there's no way in hell we're ever going to stop them. We're going to be completely fucked. So we've got to stop the aliens from getting to Earth. Well, that just kind of that whole premise is just ruined if the aliens were already here on Earth, and we were able to counteract them with modern day weapons technology. That just completely defeats the purpose. And second of all, the just the idea of trying to turn it into this like Wes Craven, I Know What You Did Last Summer high school teenage premise was just pathetic. I mean, I think part of what makes the Alien films work is that you are shoved off into this world that is completely devoid of anything recognizable, of anything comforting, of anything familiar. You are in a completely alien environment. So I really didn't think. I mean, I like the idea of the whole alien versus predator thing, that the aliens are the prey that the predators hunt and that sort of thing. I like that, and it had potential, but not that. And a lot of these versus things are kind of, I mean, it gets back to like, Godzilla versus King Kong, and all the way up to recently with like Freddy versus Jason. I can remember when I was a little kid having that conversation with my friends. If Freddy and Jason got in a fight, who would win? And that whole thing, it just doesn't work, in my opinion. And although one thing I heard, this idea was scrapped, but for Freddy versus Jason, the original idea, they wanted to have when Freddy and Jason are going to come at each other right at the end, they wanted to have Pinhead from Hellraiser appear and say, "Gentlemen, what seems to be the trouble?" Yeah. And it's like, that would have been so cool, because Hellraiser is such a great, well, the first half of Hellraiser is such a great series. But up until about after Hellraiser 4, that's kind of it. But but anyway, so those versus things don't usually work. RoboCop versus Terminator was okay, but that was mainly just a video game, so it didn't really intrude on the franchise very much. Although I did like, I'm sorry to ramble here, but I did like the idea that the RoboCop was the technology that bridged the gap into the Terminators, because that makes sense. Miles, I'm sorry, my dinner is ready. If Miles Dyson is able to create the Terminator based on Terminator technology, that doesn't even make sense. There would be no way for the Terminator to be created in the first place if Terminator technology was what he needed to create. It just doesn't follow logically, so I like that kind of filled the gap. Anyway, so number 7, Johnny Mnemonic. Yeah, I said it. Johnny Mnemonic was a movie. If you haven't seen it, and you don't follow William Gibson, you're probably not aware of it. It did okay in the box office. It didn't do as well as expected. A lot, as far as an adaptation of William Gibson's writing, it adapts. I feel like it adapts the atmosphere and the setting perfectly. I know my dad actually met William Gibson a few years ago. I was in middle school. Anyway, he met William Gibson at one point, and I think I showed off my autographed copy of Neuromancer it was the response to Coco Monkey. Anyway, Gibson said in meeting him, Gibson said of the film of Johnny Mnemonic that he felt like it was just, they just made it into a total game of cops and robbers. And I can understand that. It became, in a lot of ways, it's just a backdrop for a bunch of action sequences. Gibson's writing is very cerebral, and they made it into a game. They're trying to make it into something like Escape from New York or something like that. But it so beautifully captures the atmosphere of Gibson's writing, and visually, it's a film that I can just lose myself in. One of the most iconic elements of Gibson's writing is the bridge, and the bridge was taken over by a bunch of low-techs and what are called low-techs, which are like street punks that are computer hackers and that sort of thing. It was taken over, and it's this just refuge of kind of, modern day sort of adult Lost Boys kind of people, and they are committed to they're kind of like, in a way, they're kind of like what Anonymous aspires to be, of this, or not Anonymous, more like WikiLeaks or something like that, of like they disseminate secret government information and corporate information and all that, and they're anarchists and that sort of thing. And it's just beautiful I keep using that word, but it is just stunning to see the bridge realized. And when I watch it, I feel like I'm there, and for that reason, because visually it just so captures William Gibson's world, I think, that it really it's just an experience worth having. And I so appreciate that he was not happy with what they did with the idea. And of course, it's far it's another example of science fiction that's very outdated. The idea, if you don't know, is that Johnny Mnemonic, played by Keanu Reeves, is a data courier, and he has an implant in his brain that allows him to store, plug in like a USB drive and store data in his head, and that way he can take sensitive data for corporations or for governments, and he can carry it from one location to the next without without anybody being aware of what he's doing or anything like that. The exact amount of data that he's able to store is escaping me right now, but it's just kind of funny to think about, because you could so easily store that amount of data on a external hard drive nowadays, so it's really, it does seem outdated in that regard. There a lot of people, I don't think Keanu Reeves is a great actor at all. I mean, I think he has been playing, honestly, I love a lot of his movies. I love The Matrix. I even enjoyed The Lake House, but I think he's been playing Bill and Ted, Ted for, his pretty much his entire career. And by the way, I heard Bill and Ted, they're making a third Bill and Ted movie. It's going to be awesome. Anyway, but he's been playing Ted for his entire career, just variations on that. And, he always emphasizes the wrong word. It's kind of like if the line is "there's somebody at the door," he says "there's somebody at the door." And so he's so stiff and uncomfortable. But the thing is, all of his confinement as an actor, all of his difficulty, all of his shortcomings, somehow it just plays into all of that movie perfectly. He feels like this, happening surfer dude kind of guy who is forced to, for his career's sake, exist on a cosmopolitan level that he would not otherwise exist on. And so he's gotten very comfortable in all of that, and he feels very out of his element, but in his element at the same time, when he is on the lam and he's running from all these people and everything. So that aspect of it is really cool, and it really works well for his character. And there's a speech that he gives this ranting, raving speech at one point that a lot of people didn't like. I really liked it, because at one point, he's saying, I want a $1,000 a night hooker, and I want this and that, because he's angry because his posh lifestyle that he's gotten accustomed to has been taken away from him. And at one point, he just goes, "I want room service!" And a lot of people thought that was cheesy. I loved it. It so encapsulates that character. You just get so much of what he is in that line, and it's so much of what the world that he's in is, and so that for that reason, Johnny Mnemonic remains one of my favorite movies. And there's a great scene in Third Rock from the Sun. I just love because I know it wasn't a hit with a lot of critics, and it wasn't a hit with a lot of people. And if you're going to ask, yes, I've not played, but I've seen the Johnny Mnemonic CD-ROM game, and it's every bit as bad as everyone says it is. Um, anyway, the but there's a scene in Third Rock from the Sun that's just great where there is uh, there's there first of all, it has one of the best lines in the whole series. This is the episode where the snow is coming down. They're seeing snow for the first time, and they run back in and say, "Run, albino brain chiggers!" Just every time I mean, it's just amazing. And then and that's chiggers with a ch, by the way, in case you're thinking of getting flag happy. And but then Harry is working at the video store, and all of the movies, every single movie is checked out except one. And this guy comes in and he says, "Well, you're just in time, sir. We have 7 copies of Johnny Mnemonic. And if that's not your cup of tea, we have 5 copies of The Making of Johnny Mnemonic." My favorite line in the whole series. I want to add something, by the way, to that. I had to, in kind of putting this together, I had to do a lot of thinking or comparison between that and another science fiction film called Strange Days that is definitely one of my top 10 favorite movies, or not top 10, but one of my favorite movies, but I'm just trying to pick 10 entries, if you will. But Strange Days is another cyberpunk film. I think Johnny Mnemonic is really, in terms of style and flair and all of that, is really one of the best cyberpunk movies. And so that gets my vote. But Strange Days is a really fantastic cyberpunk movie, and it presents something that is far more plausible than what's presented in Johnny Mnemonic. Only in the sense that it's cyberpunk, but it feels like it's just a few years in the future. It's about the year 2000. It's set around New Year's 2000, and so obviously in terms of time, it's very dated. But even so, that kind of works to its advantage because you feel like maybe this is something that the plot is something that could happen in the next few years. And the idea is just that the government, or not the government creates this thing initially for covert operations and that sort of thing, and investigative, wiretapping procedures and everything. Is this thing that fits onto your cranium, and it records onto your head, whatever. It records everything that you experience, like it records all of your senses: touch, taste, feel, movement, all motion, all feelings, everything is recorded by this device. And eventually, of course, it goes out. When the film starts, this has been out on the black market for years, and people are selling clips of sexual fantasies. Obviously, pornography just explodes, and then different vicarious thrills of if you want to see what it's like to rob a bank or something like that, you can have the actual thrill, the actual experience that somebody had. And it's a great idea, really cool idea, and the technology is captured so well. The soundtrack is superb. The soundtrack to Johnny Mnemonic is superb as well. Brad Fiedel, and then is amazing on Johnny Mnemonic, and then all of the bands that they used on there are great. Strange Days is great. I just bring that up because I wanted to put that out there. If you haven't seen Strange Days, it's fantastic. Ray Fiennes is in it. He's awesome. Juliette Lewis is in it. She is gorgeous, and she is just constantly naked. And by the way, Dina Meyer is in Johnny Mnemonic and she's the babe in that one. She doesn't get naked in that one, but she, save for a facing away from the camera thing, but she does get naked in Starship Troopers, and she is so hot. Dina, if you are out there, please contact me. I want to do things to you. Please, just give me a buzz. You won't regret it. Seriously. Number 6, the films of Stanley Kubrick. Most specifically, Clockwork Orange, Eyes Wide Shut, and 2001: Space Odyssey. One, Kubrick so wonderfully adapts, novels so frequently. Clockwork Orange is almost just point by point exactly the same as the book. The dialogue, most of the dialogue is, right along with it, and it just captures. I mean, he doesn't try to adapt so much as just present what's directly there. In the case of 2001: A Space Odyssey, he and Arthur C. Clarke worked so closely together, and the movie actually ended up coming out first, that people initially thought Arthur C. Clarke's book was just a tie-in to the movie. So, he adapts so wonderfully. He captures he captures tension so well. He's a great epic cinematographer. And one of the things off of Clockwork Orange is definitely my favorite movie by him. And what I love is, like, he has this really great skill with these huge wide shots, these huge wide angle epic shots. And in A Clockwork Orange, he takes those and imposes that wide, expansive effect on very close, very intimate images. So the shot on Malcolm McDowell at the beginning is just, in the opening scene is just superb. I mean, it is so penetrating and so intimidating. It's beautiful. It's amazing. Quite a good soundtrack, I must say. Beethoven, you can't really go wrong. But and I love and the book is one of my favorite books as well. Anthony Burgess is amazing. But I love the idea of, especially now as we're having this debate about, well, what if intense violence and intense sexuality and all of this is going to cause juvenile delinquency. And Burgess is actually posing the idea that what if you could so overpower someone with violent and sexual images that their brains would just shut down, that they wouldn't have the capacity for that anymore. So it's a great idea. And of course, the characters, as disgusting and horrifying as they are, the Droogs are just one of those filmmaking cultural cornerstones. I remember I dressed up as Alex one year for Halloween when I was a kid. So it's just such an iconic image that it's just fantastic. And then 2001, but then Eyes Wide Shut. Really, it's funny. It took me a long time to appreciate it. I had to see it several times before I really appreciated it completely. But immersion is something that's very important to me in a movie. I should totally forget everything around me when I'm watching a movie, I think. And so in that regard, it accomplishes it beautifully, especially, of course, the masked ball scene. Again, it's become an iconic filmmaking moment. So that's amazing. That is just so beautifully captured. Because of that movie, Jocelyn Polk became one of my favorite soundtrack composers. She is so inventive and so, she did another movie called Room in Rome, which, in addition to being a extremely explicit and very erotic lesbian kind of chamber drama, it has her soundtrack, and her soundtracks just never cease to just completely absorb me. She really transcends music and instrumentation, if you will. You don't feel like you're listening to music or listening to instruments playing music. You just feel like you're listening to pure music, and that's really an amazing thing to think about. And so because of that, I absolutely love her. The only thing I didn't like about Eyes Wide Shut is that, and about Stanley Kubrick in general, is that Kubrick is just so fixated on making sure that everybody understands everything that's going on, that he will just beat the meaning of everything into you. He just pounds the message and the meaning into you. And so in Eyes Wide Shut, you have these long, slow conversations. It's like, did you understand what I just said? Okay, now did you understand what I just said about what I just said? Okay, now did you understand? It's just dry. It just that aspect of Kubrick I don't like. I also I should say, of course, Full Metal Jacket is an amazing movie as well. And R. Lee Ermey is just sublime in that as the drill sergeant. I remember when I was in college, we would play Halo. We get together on a local LAN and sit in the same room and play Halo some nights. And I had hotkeys programmed on my desktop to play R. Lee Ermey quotes. So did your parents have any children that lived? Looks like the best part of you ran down the crack of your mama's ass and ended up as a brown stain on the mattress. Just these great, how tall are you, Private? 5'8", sir. I didn't know they stacked shit that high. Just all those. I had all of those programmed for when I'd frag people, I'd get the quotes in there. So that was so awesome. So anyway, Artificial Intelligence was a really good movie, but I met Brian Aldiss at was it Worldcon in Boston, and I asked him what he thought, and he said that Kubrick completely missed the point of the thing. In that case, so I guess he doesn't always adapt well. But he said I read as soon as I saw what Kubrick had in mind, I knew he was going to have David find Blue Fairy and become a real boy, and that was never the point of the story. So it was a good movie, and it was absolutely a sci-fi tearjerker. But I kind of understand where all this is coming from in terms of the departure. Simba needed some loving, so we're gonna hold him while we talk about number 5. Which is going to be the films of David Lynch. I am a hello. I am a ginormous fan of David Lynch, and he is far and away my favorite director. And a lot of people may consider it pretentious and that sort of thing, but he really is just a master of making movies that speak on their own terms, and they are complete on their own terms. I can watch one of his movies and feel that even if I've seen something that doesn't make direct sense to me, I still feel like I've seen a completed idea. Twin Peaks is far and away one of my favorite TV series. I think it's terrible that they got canceled after 2 seasons, but of course that does add to the mystique. I love Blue Velvet. It's just surrealist, absurdist noir at its very best. He really knows how to bring out the best in Kyle MacLachlan. He's a sleepy boy. No. Anyway, but Eraserhead is just so wonderfully absorbing. I mean, it's just stunning, and it's funny. I actually saw a documentary one time about midnight movies where people were saying that they said that there were theaters because Eraserhead was so horrific and so bizarre and disturbing that there were theaters that actually wouldn't sell tickets to pregnant women to see Eraserhead. And I remember they talked to one guy who had worked at a box office at a midnight movie cinema back in the day when Eraserhead was showing. And he said that on any other movie, any of the other midnight movies, if it was Pink Flamingos or Holy Mountain or any of the other famous midnight movies, people would go see them and they'd come out walking and talking. They'd walk out talking about what they'd seen and talking about their experience and all that. And with Eraserhead, people just walked out in total silence. And that really is, you really can't see Eraserhead without just being completely dumbstruck. And there are so many moments in that movie that are just amazing. The lady in the radiator and her song and In Heaven and all of that is just amazing. And so I love that movie. Sonically, the music is just so in all of his movies, because Angelo Badalamenti does his soundtracks. They are so thick and dark and murky, and they just complement the movies themselves so well. I mean, it proceeds directly. It's as if the music proceeds directly from David Lynch himself, and the sound effects are just stunning. And it's really from David Lynch that I developed my love of like ambient music and dark, drone music and stuff like Lustmord and Boyd Rice and Merzbow and just all of the great ambient music and all of that. And so I really really loved David Lynch. Twin Peaks. It's funny, like all of the guys in my current, not Twin Peaks, but Wild at Heart. It's funny, all of the guys in my current band were all fans of David Lynch. We love David Lynch, and so actually there's a reference. The title of the CD we want to put out is a reference to a David Lynch movie, and I'm not going to say it or say which movie, but it's really cool. It's really cool. You'll see it when it comes out. But anyway, Wild at Heart is amazing. It's another one of those things where it's like Nicolas Cage is a great actor when he's playing the right part. Kind of like what I was saying earlier about Keanu Reeves. Only Nicolas Cage can actually act. And when he's in the right part, he just fits it like a glove. And it's just one of those parts that's just perfect for him, where he beats up the guy at the Power Mad concert and then he sings Elvis to Laura Dern. It's just so sublime, and to see this thrash metal band suddenly go into golden oldies rock and roll. It's just so surreal and so wonderful. But for me, I love that there's this downward descent, not only thematically into madness for David Lynch, but also in his movies. But also, it seems like his movies as a whole are taking that course, like they're becoming increasingly nonlinear, increasingly surreal, increasingly dreamlike, really. And I think we really first started to notice that with Lost Highway. I mean, Lost Highway. I remember I was in high school when that came out, and people were like, "You have to see this movie, Lost Highway. You can't understand it unless you're on drugs." And I would say, "Well, did you watch it on drugs?" "Yeah." "Did you understand it?" "No, but you still have to see it on drugs." And it went on in that vein, and it was just so cool. And to watch that, and then watch Mulholland Drive, which the soundtrack on that is amazing, and of course just Naomi Watts and Laura Harring are just absolutely gorgeous. And then so it's a stunning movie, this wonderful, fascinating kind of descent into madness. And then his most recent film, Inland Empire. I keep saying, like, whatever his most recent movie is keeps becoming my favorite David Lynch movie. Inland Empire is beyond amazing. I think there was Oscar buzz about Laura Dern's performance in that, and it's totally justified in my opinion. And I will be, I think I will have reached something as a writer if I can accomplish in fiction what he accomplished in literary fiction, what he accomplishes on screen with that movie. And also, if you see Inland Empire, one of the things you need to see to understand it is the movie. Is his series of internet short films that he took them down. They're hard to find now, but you really need to see them if you want to understand it. Is a series called Rabbits, and Rabbits is amazing again, but it's Naomi Watts and Laura Harring and a gentleman, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but they're all in rabbit costumes, and they live in this apartment, and it's a single camera, fixed camera shot. Just every episode is one unbroken shot, and it's like you're watching a stage play. And it is haunting and disturbing and puzzling and fascinating, and the kind of the contemplation, or the impression that a lot of people seem to have, is that these rabbits are kind of souls in hell or maybe in purgatory. Characters say things like, "I wonder who I shall be," and that's one of the things. Is all the dialogue seems very disjointed and disconnected, like they're not really talking they're talking at each other, not to each other. And so they say these subtle things like that. And you really need to see Rabbits, because Rabbits, the characters show up as a part of Inland Empire, and so it really makes a lot more sense if you see if you're familiar with Rabbits as well. So and just the way David Lynch expresses and emotions, he can take things that seem utterly unrelated and utterly disconnected and bring them together in such a way that you feel like it makes total and complete natural sense. And there's a guy on here. Go on YouTube, youtube.com/not David Lynch, and he's this guy that's a David Lynch impersonator, and he is pitch perfect. He looks just like him. He sounds just like him. It is awesome. And he's got this one series called David Lynch Problem Solver, where he shows up. Like people are having like these kind of problems, these arguments or whatever, and he shows up and says, "Hey, I think what he does the David Lynch hand thing. I think what you need is," and he pulls out something that's totally unrelated, totally random. There's like random objects and bizarre things, and he says, and gives it to him, and they go, "Thanks, David Lynch," and like it makes sense. And it's just, if you know David Lynch and his movies, then it's just that much funnier. It's that much more surreal. So definitely check that out. And also Dune. Dune is a fantastic movie. Again, a great performance from Kyle MacLachlan. Visually very amazing. Really, again, it's something that really, I think, captures the feel and the spirit of the book. There's something about the anger and the tenacity of the performers that really captures it. That said, there are a couple of things that it kind of like it shortens large sections of the book, things you want to relish more. Like the character of Duncan Idaho is hardly developed at all, and he becomes very important later in the series. And things like all of the battles that are fought are just kind of slammed down to just to kind of a montage. So those things I didn't like about it, but again, that was kind of David Lynch being hired to make a mainstream Hollywood project. So it wasn't really totally his baby, but it's still fantastically well done. Toto does a great soundtrack, and Also, The Elephant Man is really good. It's definitely worth looking at. Again, another movie he was hired to make, but so those kind of seem kind of apart from his otherwise conceptual continuity, but they're both fantastic films. So everything David Lynch has done, absolutely check it out. Also check out the short films of David Lynch. There is early kind of student projects and early short films that still capture the vibe of what he's doing. One thing that's really cool on YouTube, there's a video where somebody has taken one of the David Lynch short films and synced it up to the song 46 and 2 by Tool, and it just fits so well. It's so cool to watch. Number 4 would be The Animatrix, and that is far and away, I think, my favorite of the Animatrix films, even though it's outside the main trilogy. But what really draws me in about it, one is that it gets into the minutia of how the Matrix works, the little details, how people are able to exploit glitches within the Matrix without even knowing it, and then I also like that it really delves into the bleakness of it, the background of the Matrix. The second Renaissance sequence is just stunning. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me when I see that. I love that whole sequence, the whole apocalyptic look of it, just the massive destruction, and it's just uh, represented in such a gorgeous way. And one of my favorite scenes is when or parts is where you see the robotic horse riding along. The guy on the robotic horse is just amazing. So that one, that just blows my mind. Peter Chung's contribution, Matriculation, is without a doubt the trippiest animation you will ever see to date. I mean, it's just unreal. And so I love all of the different approaches, all of the different styles. They got just some of the best, absolute best studios to make those. And I love collections of short films that are built around a specific theme anyway. And like there used to be a DVD magazine. I don't think they do it anymore, but a DVD magazine called Short. And they would do, like, there's one that's just based around dreams, and there's one that's based around death, and so on and so forth. And so I love those collections of short films around a specific theme, and the Matrix is just perfect for that. I mean, the Matrix is just a creative wonderland of ideas and possibilities. So that aspect is incredibly cool, and of course, as always, it raises so many wonderful philosophical questions about mortality, about logic, rationality, the nature of existence, everything, but in such a cool and slick and palatable way. So the Animatrix is absolutely one of my favorites. Number 3, Heavy Metal. the just one of the Again, I love animation, and I love science fiction, and I love heavy metal, and I love hot babes. So it just kind of hits on every level. I love the idea of just having these kind of miniature stories built around the larger framing story. I actually think it flows really well, and I could never pick just a favorite sequence out of it. I love Hand Over Fist. I love the whole taxi cab thing. I love I mean, I just love all. I love where he's the scene with the planes, where they find the dead bodies on the planes. The John Candy nerd character that becomes this big, Hulk Hogan kind of creature. And I just love the whole movie. It is such a trip, and it is so. I mean, it's just pure movie making soul food to me. I mean, it just is so so wonderfully inviting, if that makes sense. It's such a it demonstrates, it captures really well the heavy metal, the comic book, how it can go from being very silly and offbeat to being very serious and dark, uh, back and forth, and all ranges in between, very smoothly and very comfortably and very seamlessly. And the different looks that each sequence has flow together very nicely. And the music, of course, is amazing. I mean, one of my all-time favorite Black Sabbath songs, "Mob Rules." Probably my favorite Blue Oyster Cult song, "Veteran of the Psychic Wars." And then, of course, Donald Fagen's on there. And of course, Journey doing "Open Arms," which is, arguably one of their best songs. So the soundtrack, just one after the other, the soundtrack is just fantastic. If you get the DVD version, like you could get any other version now, but on the DVD there is a deleted sequence that they only really did the animatics for it, and they include the animatics, just the rough sketches of animation, that's supposed to be what happens to the Lochnar after, when it's clutched in Hanover Fist's hand, and is speeding towards that planet when it goes into the atmosphere and hits the water. And it's this beautiful thing of just the evolution of evil. And it's so beautiful. How they didn't put that in the movie is beyond me. I mean, I don't know if it was time constraints or budget constraints or what, but it was just stunning, and it just brought everything together so well. And a lot of the sequences don't segue directly from one to the next, but that one just establishes a beautiful segue between Hanover Fist and the military gunners sequence. And so that scene is really cool. And for some reason, it's not like Dark Side of the Moon where it syncs up or anything. But I always get chills when I watch that deleted sequence and play the song "Innuendo" by Queen. It just works. But yeah. So then, the whole final sequence, just this beautiful dramatic closing sequence. I love that the characters, the female characters in that show or in that movie and in the comic book, so frequently defy expectations. You have the characters that are airheaded bimbos, and then you have male characters who are equally airheaded. But then you turn it around and see very powerful female characters and very brazenly sexy female characters. And that the final sequence is just a wonderful example of that. And so that the whole film, everything about it, the look, the structure, everything is just perfect. It's one of the most, I could watch it a million times and not get bored. I made my rhythm guitarist in the band I'm in now sit down and watch it with me, and my singer too, just to make sure we were all, because it's been such a big influence on us, like writing for this project that we're working on. Like, we're trying to capture the vibe of Heavy Metal Magazine, basically. And so yeah, huge film for me. And that's number 3. I could watch it time and time again and never get tired of it. And for those of you that are certainly going to ask, yes, I have seen Heavy Metal FAKK 2000, and I thought it was good. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it, just as a good animated, adult animated kind of action sci-fi flick. I didn't really. I didn't think it was anywhere near as high quality as the original Heavy Metal, and I don't think it quite so much captured the vibe of the comics as well. The soundtrack was great, as far as the bands. Some of them I didn't think quite fit, but on the whole, all of the bands on that soundtrack were good. Even ICP has a good song on there. One of my favorite Monster Magnet songs on there. So, a lot of good bands there, good soundtrack. I'm also not that big a fan of Julie Strain myself, so a comic character based on her doesn't really appeal to me. I would much rather see a movie adaptation of the characters that Serpieri does for the heavy metal comics, like Druina and that sort of thing. Number 2, the films of Don Bluth, mainly The Secret of Nim. Don Bluth is an animator par excellence. He is a lot of people, I'm sure, will be familiar with him for Dragon's Lair and Space Ace, the two video games which are visually beautiful to look at, but literally are about as interactive as flipping through a DVD menu. But anyway, they were both groundbreaking at the time. Dragon's Lair, he's very famous for that. But then the movies, mainly The Secret of Nim. But most of his movies I love: American Tail, Secret of Nim, even A Land Before Time, Anastasia, Titan AE. He made a movie called Rockadoodle that was just so not. But no, nobody's perfect. But anyway, I want to do. I'm gonna need to, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm gonna need to do it. Anyway, is that I've been wanting to do a video comparing the films of Don Bluth to the philosophy of Ayn Rand. And it's funny to think about, but I think a lot of the arguments and the values and the stories that are presented in Don Bluth's films were kind of a primer for me getting into the philosophy of Ayn Rand later in life. And but Secret of Nim is one of those movies. See, Don Bluth is what caused the so-called Disney Renaissance. He left Disney and started Sullivan Bluth Productions, and they started putting out these incredible animated feature films that were just blowing Disney out of the water, especially during the 80s and early 90s. And so that forced Disney to up the ante. The feature presentations, the quality of the feature presentations from Disney had really gone downhill. Things like what am I thinking? Like Aristocats and Lady and the Tramp, and that those are all great. Don't get me wrong; they're all great films, but they just don't have that same grandeur as like the early ones, like the Snow Whites and that sort of thing. Peter Pan, as disgustingly racist as it is. And all of those early films, they kind of lost the magic a little bit, and that forced them to come back when they started doing The Little Mermaid and Lion King and Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and Hunchback of Notre Dame. That whole era where they just and Pocahontas in there too. That whole era just was launched out of competition with Don Bluth. And so Secret of Nim mainly is the main film for number 2. Adapted from one of my favorite books. It takes children's books. It takes some liberties with the source material. There's no sword fighting in the first one. In the book. There's no magic amulets in the book. But even so, it from just being, I can remember, and in fact I can remember the first time I saw that movie. We went over to the home of a coworker, actually a manager of my dad's, from his work, and the adults needed to go do their thing and socialize, whatever. And so the guy put me down in a like master bedroom with a big screen TV, and gave me just a stack of movies to watch. And I remember the movies I watched that night were Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is phenomenal as well, of course, and The Secret of Nim. And The Secret of Nim just blew my mind. I mean, oh my God, it just sucked me in. To this day, even after all of the animation and all the innovations in animation that have come after it, Don Bluth's animation to me is just timeless. It is every bit as radiant and beautiful today as it was back then. There is something about his character design, his visual technique that captures uh, just captures each character so perfectly. And it's just so just transcendent to watch his work. In Secret of Nim especially. Don't watch Secret of Nim 2. Don't watch any of the sequels to anything Don Bluth has done. He doesn't do sequels for the most part. So Secret of Nim 2, Five Will Goes West, An American Tale, or Five Will Goes West, American Tale. What I'm trying to think, like any of the Land Before Time sequels, he doesn't do the sequels. None of them measure up in any way, shape, or form. Just his feature films are incredible. Anastasia is amazing, and Titan AE is amazing. Very, very unsung, kind of sleeper hit, if you will, Titan AE, and it really is another one that I think captures the philosophy of Ayn Rand very well. So, Don Bluth, mainly Secret of Nim, and then all of the other good stuff that he's done comes in at number 2. All right, before I give you the number 1, I'll read off the movies that barely missed the cut. These are all favorite movies of mine as well, but if I can only do 10, I mean, only wanted to do 10, and then I probably have 100 or so favorite films, but 12 Monkeys, Lars von Trier's Antichrist, Delta of Venus, Audition, Ichi the Killer, Gozu, A Boy and His Dog, The Fountainhead, Apocalypse Now, and I could go on and on, Logan's Run, Rollerball, so many. But my number 1 movie, Blade Runner. Absolutely stunning film. Another example of why Ridley Scott is a fantastic director. And then Vangelis doing the soundtrack. Vangelis is one of those composers that can just so seamlessly integrate synthesizers and orchestral elements, live symphonic elements. And one thing, the thing that keeps coming back to me is, of course, atmosphere is very important to me. And when you watch Blade Runner, it's impossible not to get drawn into the atmosphere. I mean, you are there, and in just such a very real way. And what's amazing about that movie, there are certain movies that are timeless, that will never age. They will never show their age. And they will look just as current as the day they were made. And Blade Runner is a stunning example of that. Jurassic Park is another one. The Indiana Jones movies are another example. Star Wars would be an example if it wasn't for the 70s hairstyles. But the certain movies that will never be locked into one specific era. But Blade Runner is absolutely that. I mean, it deals with, first of all, Philip K. Dick. Anything that's built around Philip K. Dick's writing, I think, is going to be incredible. And Philip K. Dick is one of the just obviously leading lights of science fiction, one of the most important writers in science fiction, and I could go on and on forever. I think probably my favorite book by him is A Scanner Darkly, but the books are so good. And he along with Harlan Ellison helped bring in the new wave of science fiction, and he's got his story in Dangerous Visions is amazing if you ever read that. Blade Runner is such a well-realized film. I love the philosophy of it. I love how Rutger Hauer plays Roy Batty so perfectly. I mean, it's really, in a way, more about him than it is about Rick Deckard. I mean, Rick Deckard is more of just a catalyst for Roy Batty, for making Roy Batty kind of this anti-hero, and I can so relate to the paranoia of Philip K. Dick's writing. I think a lot of people can, but and you get so drawn into that character. Imagine that you're this android, replicant that is programmed to die in 4 years. You have a consciousness and you have an identity, but it's been programmed. It's not real. None of your memories are real. All of your memories actually happen to other people. And all of these things, and you're treated as being, you're considered subhuman even though you're above humanity. And it's just all of that, all of the philosophical questions that it raises are just brought up, are just demonstrated so beautifully. And Roy Batty's speech, the Rutger Hauer speech at the end, if I had to do like a top 10 of my favorite speeches in movies, that would definitely be towards the top. I think number one would probably be "Son of a Woman," Al Pacino speech at the end of "Son of a Woman," but the that would be like number two is the Tears and Rain speech. Just and the way Vangelis' music just comes up around what he's saying, it's just it is just fascinating, heart wrenching, gorgeous every time I see it. And it's another one of those movies. I actually went through a phase when I was 12. I went through this phase for about like a month. I watched Blade Runner every day, and on video. And one thing I have to bitch about, by the way, I'm so glad I have the VHS, the unrated director's cut VHS of Blade Runner, because from what I understand, the final cut that Ridley Scott did, and this is another one of those, like George Lucas going back and changing your work later, and forcing everybody to suffer through the results, is this this thing that one of the great parts, one of the great elements of Blade Runner is Harrison Ford's narrative, the internal monologue. It gives it that film noir quality, and it gets you inside the character. And I don't know how you could make the movie function without that. I mean, without Harrison Ford, commenting that at the end of his life, Roy Batty must have cared more about human life than he ever had before. Without that, it doesn't make any sense that he grabs Harrison Ford before he falls off the building and saves him. It just doesn't even make sense. And without the monologue, we lose so much about the character of Rick Deckard, that he's not this jaded, hard-boiled detective. He's just an old drunk that shoots unarmed women in the back. And so you lose so much, and that's apparently not on, like, the Blu-ray came out. For a minute I was like, oh great, the Blu-ray of Blade Runner is coming out, this is going to be awesome. And then I found out, no, it doesn't have the monologue. Screw it. I mean, if you can't see it with Harrison Ford's monologue, go get the Laserdisc, go get the VHS, whatever you have to do, you have to see it with his monologue. I mean, for fuck's sake, for something like that, at least make it switchable. Make it an option if you want to. Okay, this is the Ridley Scott wanted it without the monologue. Okay, you can have that option. You want it with the internal monologue, have that option. I mean, just give people the fucking choice to whether or not to have it. I hate that. I sincerely hope, there are certain people, there are certain things like, I know they want to go back. There was a campaign for a while to go back in Huckleberry Finn and take out the N-word and republish it that way. And I think that's absolutely just awful, just wrong. That you don't get to just go back and change other people's art to suit your political correctness and that sort of thing. I think that's horrible. But for God's sake, if that's the definitive version, I can only hope that after Ridley Scott is gone, which hopefully will be a long time from now, but after he's gone, that people, that the production company or the owners, copyright owners, will see fit to publish a version that has the internal monologue. You got to have it. But again, Blade Runner, my favorite movie. The soundtrack is amazing. The visuals are amazing. Great acting from everybody involved, and the characters. especially the characters that play the replicants, the actors that play the replicants, capture the intensity and the kind of killer instinct of those characters so well. Um, all of the little things in that, it's just a stunning, beautiful movie. So my favorite. There you go. Hope that was enlightening, interesting, whatever. Working on the My Little Pony analysis, and I am also working on another video that will return to my deconstruction of various philosophies. And just to give you a teaser, the first 4 words will be how to lie like.